This is such an incredibly exciting event. Thank you so much for organizing this, Steve, the wonderful talks. I too miss Gordon and love Hughes. Thank you, KWH, for putting all this together, to Al and Jessica and All and Charles. To begin, my thanks probably should extend back to 2007 in Tokyo, where I enthusiastically, and probably in retrospect, over-enthusiastically, I spent a painful day reading through my entire correspondence from the time, which I will not cite here to save some modicum of credibility for myself. At any rate, back in 2007, I wrote to Charles, and he graciously allowed me to start segmenting files for free. Not knowing anyone or the language where I was living, I set out with relish in my solitude to process the line series and the ear in, to segment Gregory Whitehead and Louis Zukofsky, William Carlos Williams, Rosemary Waldrop, too many poets to mention. For those of us in the room, and there's many of us, I think, by the look of it, who have had this experience, it is a transformative one. I don't think I really listened to poetry until I began to segment MP3s for PennSound, so I'm very thankful for that. Now, I'd like to listen to a very special set of PennSound files right now. If it's all right with you, by you, of course, I mean the audience. And that is both you here now, live, and those streaming online, I suppose, as well as the audience arriving later on headphones, home speakers, or classrooms. To you, that polyvalent you, I beg your indulgence in a breach of PennSound protocol, multiple breaches. Now that Steve has reminded us of the manifesto, I think this breaks most of the rules. I'd prefer not to name the reader, nor the poem, nor the track number. Similarly, I hope not to speak the title of the reading, not give the date of its delivery, nor the provenance of its recording. Instead, and I realize this is a leap of faith, perhaps unfair on my part to ask, but I will ask you, and now I mean only you, just folks here in this room, bodies together, I ask you to listen in absolute silence. I'll explain further after the playback, but for now I must, at the very least, admit that the recording of this event, happening now, may offer the only entry point into this particular recording on PennSound, so this will be the only trace of it, though it does exist in a somewhat hidden fashion. Please then I ask you, as we must always, to bear the future in mind as we listen.
My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as if of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drain. A moment since, and leafy word it sunk. 'Tis not from envy thine happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beech and green, and shadows numberless, singest of summer and full-throated ease. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long hour on the deep-delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green dance, and Provençal song and sunbeam mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and with thee fade into the forest dim, fade far away, and fast forget what thou on earth hast never known. The weariness, the fever, and the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few last sad gray hairs, where youth grows dumb and fever thin and dies, and new love cannot live beyond tomorrow, where beauty cannot live.
Begging Steve's forgiveness, as well as yours, the audience, here and beyond, in further disrespect to this evening's format, though in full fidelity, I think, to PennSound's core, perhaps the crest unnamed tape that Steve mentioned, I'd like to conclude with a few remarks that make no direct commentary on the track we just heard whatsoever. Noting at the very least, I suppose I must, that the tracks, the file does indeed exist, even if just barely, to those who might tunnel through the back corridors and lists of folders on the PennSound media server. That the trace of the former presence in the archive yet remains, and that if I wish this sound to absorb into the archive, it is best not to mention any of this information. If I want it to stay on PennSound, that is, we must not talk about it. Instead, I'd like to draw your attention, our attention, to the indirect, to the absences, the lapses, skips, pauses, and gaps in the PennSound collection, to the mislabeled files and incongruous pages, to the protected folders and long derelict, but I think cherished real audio files that still exist, to the corrections and emendations to archival files made by amateurs like myself, on Audacity, no less. This, I think, is what makes PennSound remarkable. It is to these heterotopic qualities of the PennSound collection that I would like to devote a moment of our collective reflection. Reflect. PennSound, like Laura Palmer or Rosie Larson, has secrets. So many secrets. Every time one embarks on research or a listening trip through the archive, there are hidden tracks to find. There's mislabeled duplicates. There are poems we thought were lost. There are forgotten exchanges with the audience. In short, a whole range of uncatalogable data that leads deeper than one had ever hoped to go from the onset. Returning then to the birth of PennSound in 2003, or actually 2004 or 5, when it was really released, as Steve mentioned, one can easily do with the Wayback Machine, and I encourage you all to look back. The pages have changed remarkably little. I wore my PennSound green today for my tie, and that PennSound green has been there really from the very beginning. Thank God its collaboration with the Penn Libraries didn't pan out, or with NEH, because, right now, there's a similar project, however, developing around PennSound. Many of us here, myself included, have been seriously and laboriously computing this audio archive of poetry as though it were birdsong for scientific study. And this, too, reveals only further mysteries, I think. Hidden passages, lost coughs. As a toast, then, on PennSound's 10th, I'd like to raise a glass to every failed endeavor to name the catalog, every failed attempt to organize, to name. May PennSound always resist these endeavors. May it live forever, as Al so eloquently said, in 1.0 city, with audio errors and fumbled chords and last-minute scrambles to make things audible. May there always be a hidden track to discover at the end of the disc. Thank you.